Hello, I'm Josh Lindquist. Today we're going to talk about the sixth episode of Rings of Power, Udun. I'm going to jump right in. I watched episode six this morning. It was good. I've talked about it in my other reviews. I think the first three episodes of this show were super, super weak in terms of writing. And even though in every other review I've said that the show looks amazing in terms of production design, visual effects, music, cinematography, everything. It looks fantastic. The acting's really good too, but the scripts were lacking. Four and five stepped it up, and I think six is about equivalent in terms of overall quality to four and five. Now, I do want to talk about a couple things. First off, I got to mention Isildur is the worst character on this show. I mean, he doesn't really have any redeeming qualities. He's pretty lame, and just that early scene in this episode when they're on the ships and he just like chucks a half-eaten apple off the boat. I'm like, dude, you're on a boat like with limited supplies. Why are you wasting half an apple, dude? Anyway, that upset me more than anything. but no, so episode six was a lot of fight sequences. Probably 35-40 minutes of the episode were battle sequences, and they were really well done in terms of the stunt work and the choreography and the lighting and the effects was all really solid. And then I was surprised at, well, we'll talk about the kind of brutality and intensity of the violence that I have mixed feelings on because, well, let's jump into it right now. Normally I like when shows go darker than expected, and I think especially when you're dealing with war, it's important to not kind of sugarcoat the violence that comes with war, you know? So, on the one hand, I was pleasantly surprised at how brutal and intense the fighting got. But on the other hand, it felt a little out of place in just the overall franchise of Middle Earth and kind of what the show was. I guess now that I think about it, this show overall has had a little more stuff. Like when Nori's dad broke his foot, that was pretty visceral. So they've had little build-ups to kind of more intense violence. You know, it kind of stands in some contrast to this being a prequel to the Hobbit trilogy and the Lord of the Rings trilogy. But yeah, so anyway, that was interesting and unexpected. But I also felt like the pacing was a little weird. You know, again, the first 35-40 minutes of the episode were really well paced, intense action scenes. And then when Numenor, spoiler alert, when Numenor kind of sweeps in and saves the day, it felt like after that there was like 20 minutes of kind of epilogue, and it felt like it went on a really long time. I almost was like I would have split this into two episodes, but it was building to that big surprise ending, and that was cool. So I don't know. Again, I think I would have condensed the first three episodes of this show into one episode, one long episode, and then had 4 or 5 be similar to what they were with some scenes cut out, and then maybe split six into two episodes. But that's big picture stuff, you know. By the way, I'm wearing this jacket because it's like 9 degrees out. So anyway, I'm not trying to look cool, believe me. The last thing I want to talk about is that scene between Adar and Galadriel after the battle, where Galadriel is like interrogating Adar, basically, and basically to summarize the scene, I mean, Adar says, we learn that Adar was one of the elves that Morgoth took and corrupted, kind of one of the first orcs. It was interesting that, he talks about how the orcs have just as much right to life as the elves do. And that, I have really mixed feelings on that. And let me tell you why. As a kid getting into Lord of the Rings, I had no issue with the orcs being, humanoid, sentient, but like a step below. They were kind of these soulless monstrosities. And as a kid, I'm like, yeah, elves, men, dwarves, good, and orcs, bad. Fine, cool, big battle, yay. But as an adult, I felt like it was kind of an oversimplification and almost a little dangerous ethically to have, these sentient. I think the term in the canon that I've heard, at least for Lord of the Rings, is like the free peoples, the elves, men, and dwarves, and hobbits, and then you have these soulless orcs. I always thought that kind of undercut the bigger discussions around the dangers of war and stuff that I think it seems like, from what I've researched, Tolkien was trying to have as kind of a theme in his stories, So I always, as an adult, going back to the books and the movies, kind of wished that the orcs had more autonomy because I thought it would have complicated things in a really interesting and nuanced way. So on the one hand, I like that they did this in the show, but then it also felt weird because it kind of makes it hard to then go back and watch the battles in the Lord of the Rings movies and the Hobbit movies when you're like, oh, these orcs are also just as alive as the people they're fighting. It's like, yeah, they're following the wrong person, but when you have a sentient being, it's like there's a lot of variables that come into play with that. So um, it adds a level of nuance that I think those movies weren't intending to explore when they made them. So it kind of undercuts the beats and the tone in those movies. So, like, for this show, including that just for Rings of Power, I thought it was a great addition. But when you consider that this is a prequel to the Hobbit and Lord of the Rings trilogy, that's where it's kind of like it's a little bit contradicting, which is what a lot of prequels fall into, which is why it's hard to do a good prequel because we know where the story ends up and we have kind of an established end state. So it really constrains you early on with the storytelling. And that's why you have to be especially good when you're telling a prequel to be interesting and compelling. And again, I think overall, looking at the 6 episodes of this show that I have seen, the writers haven't done an excellent job of that. But again, in summation, episode 6 was pretty cool. The fight scenes are really good. The tone overall was solid. I enjoyed it. I'm excited to watch 7 and 8. I have pretty high hopes. Again, I'm glad the show has grown beyond where it was at in the first 3 episodes because 4, 5, and 6 have been a lot better. So that's my review. I'm Josh Lindquist. Thanks for watching.